NBC Studios, Burbank, California, June 25, 1968. 3 days before filming is scheduled to begin on what will become Elvis Presley's legendary comeback special, NBC executive Mike Dann sits in his office staring at a telegram that could destroy the most important television event of the decade. The message sent from the network's New York headquarters contains 5 words that make his blood run cold. Cancel Elvis special immediately. Orders. In 72 hours, Elvis Presley is supposed to walk onto a small, intimate stage and deliver what many consider the greatest performance of his career. A raw, emotional, stripped-down concert that will remind the world why he was called the King of Rock and Roll. But now, with sets built, crew hired, and Elvis already in Los Angeles preparing for what he believes will be his artistic resurrection, the most powerful television network in America wants to pull the plug on the comeback that took 3 years to negotiate. What Mike Dann doesn't know is that this cancellation order isn't about television ratings or creative differences. It's about gambling debts, mob connections, and a web of financial corruption that threatens to destroy not just Elvis's comeback, but Elvis himself. This is the story of how Elvis Presley's greatest triumph almost became his final humiliation, how a phone call from Las Vegas nearly ended the King's career forever, and how one desperate performance in a network boardroom saved both the show and the legend. The road to the 1968 comeback special had been longer and more difficult than anyone realized. By 1967, Elvis Presley was widely considered a has-been, a relic of the 1950s who had been surpassed by the Beatles, Bob Dylan, and a new generation of rock musicians who seemed more relevant to contemporary audiences. Elvis hadn't performed live in front of an audience since 1961. His movie career, which had once been lucrative, was producing increasingly forgettable films that even his most devoted fans found embarrassing. His record sales were declining, and his cultural influence seemed to be evaporating with each passing month. But beneath the surface of his professional decline, Elvis was experiencing a creative renaissance that few people understood. Hours spent at Graceland listening to the music that was changing American culture. The Beatles' Sgt. Pepper, Dylan's electric albums, soul music from Stax and Motown had convinced Elvis that he had something important to contribute to the conversation if he could find the right platform. The platform came in the form of Steve Binder, a young television producer who had worked with musicians like Petula Clark and the Monkees. Binder understood that Elvis's real power wasn't in the movies or the polished studio recordings, but in the raw charisma and musical authenticity that had made him famous in the first place. "What I want to do," Binder explained to Elvis during their first meeting in early 1967, "is strip away all the artificial stuff and just put you in front of people with a guitar. Let them see who you really are as a musician, not as a movie star." The concept was revolutionary for its time. Television variety shows were elaborate productions with full orchestras, choreographed dance numbers, and carefully scripted comedy segments. Binder was proposing something much simpler and much riskier, an intimate concert that would rely entirely on Elvis's ability to connect directly with his audience. Elvis was immediately attracted to the idea, but Colonel Tom Parker was skeptical. Parker had built Elvis's career on the principle of maintaining mystique and control. Putting Elvis in an unscripted, intimate setting where anything could happen seemed like unnecessary risk, but the financial realities of Elvis's declining career made the television special impossible to refuse. NBC was offering unprecedented money for the right to broadcast an Elvis Presley special, and Parker's own financial pressures made that offer irresistible. What Parker didn't tell Elvis was that those financial pressures were more desperate than anyone realized. The Colonel's gambling addiction had evolved into a crisis that threatened to expose secrets that could destroy both their careers. The negotiations for the special took months, with NBC executives initially insisting on a traditional Christmas show format that would showcase Elvis singing holiday classics in a safe, predictable style. Binder fought against this concept, arguing that it would waste the opportunity to re-establish Elvis as a vital contemporary artist. "Elvis doesn't need to sing Silent Night," Binder argued in meeting after meeting with network executives. "He needs to sing songs that show he's still relevant, still dangerous, still the most powerful performer in American music." The compromise that eventually emerged was revolutionary. Elvis would perform 2 shows on the same evening, one intimate acoustic concert for a small audience, and one full production number with dancers and elaborate staging. The contrast would demonstrate both his musical authenticity and his showmanship abilities. Pre-production began in the spring of 1968, with elaborate sets being constructed and intensive rehearsals scheduled. Elvis threw himself into preparation with an enthusiasm that surprised everyone who had worked with him during his movie period. Elvis was like a different person, recalled guitarist Scotty Moore, who had been brought back for the special after years away from Elvis's career. He was excited about music again, talking about songs, working on arrangements, really caring about what he was doing for the first time in years. The transformation was evident in every aspect of Elvis's preparation. He lost weight, getting himself into the best physical condition he had been in since his Army service. He worked with vocal coaches to expand his range and improve his technique. Most importantly, he began writing and arranging music again, developing original material that would showcase his growth as an artist. But the closer the special came to production, the more nervous NBC executives became about what they had committed to broadcast. The intimate concert format that had seemed innovative during planning began to seem risky and unpredictable as the actual filming date approached. The cultural and political climate of 1968 was unlike anything America had experienced before. The Vietnam War was dividing the country, civil rights protests were erupting in cities across the nation, and the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. in April had created an atmosphere of tension and unpredictability that made network executives extremely cautious about controversial programming. Elvis Presley, despite his recent commercial decline, remained a culturally provocative figure. His music was still associated with rebellion and sexuality, and his performances had the potential to create exactly the kind of controversy that television networks wanted to avoid during such a volatile time. The crisis began with a phone call from Las Vegas that reached Colonel Parker in his Beverly Hills hotel room on June 22nd, just 3 days before filming was scheduled to begin. The caller was Meyer Lansky, one of the most powerful organized crime figures in America, and his message was simple and terrifying. "Tom," Lansky said, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had made him one of the most feared men in the country. "We need to talk about your debts. The Elvis television show presents some complications that we need to address." Parker's gambling addiction had led him deep into debt with Las Vegas casinos that were controlled by organized crime. What had begun as manageable losses had escalated into a financial crisis that now totaled more than $2 million. Money that Parker couldn't pay without liquidating assets that would expose his illegal immigration status and destroy his management of Elvis. But the mob's concern wasn't just about Parker's personal debts. Elvis's comeback special represented a threat to carefully constructed business relationships that had been years in the making. The Las Vegas entertainment industry in 1968 was transitioning from a focus on traditional lounge acts to a new model based on major rock and pop stars performing extended engagements. Elvis Presley, if his comeback was successful, would become the most valuable performer in Las Vegas history, but only if his return to live performance happened in Vegas, under the control of the people who owned the casinos where Parker owed money. If Elvis proves he can still draw audiences with this television show, Lansky explained to Parker, he becomes valuable again. But if his comeback happens on television instead of in our casinos, we lose the opportunity to use that value to address your debt situation. The solution was elegant in its simplicity. Cancel the television special, leaving Elvis's comeback incomplete and his value as a live performer uncertain. Then arrange for Elvis to debut his return to live performance in Las Vegas, where the profits from his success could be used to pay Parker's debts while establishing a long-term residency that would benefit everyone except Elvis himself. Parker's response to this pressure was immediate and devastating. Within hours of his conversation with Lansky, he was on the phone to NBC executives, arguing that the special should be canceled due to creative differences and scheduling conflicts. "Elvis isn't ready for this kind of exposure," Parker told NBC programming chief Mike Dan. "The material isn't strong enough, the concept is too risky, and we think it would be better to wait until he has a stronger foundation for his comeback." But Parker had underestimated how much the network had invested in the special, both financially and creatively. NBC had committed significant resources to the production, and canceling just 3 days before filming would cost the network millions of dollars while creating a public relations disaster. More importantly, Steve Binder and other creative personnel on the special had developed a personal investment in Elvis's comeback that went beyond their professional obligations. They believed the special could be genuinely important television and genuinely important for Elvis's artistic development. When Mike Dan received the cancellation order from New York executives who had been pressured by Parker, his first instinct was to comply. The network's relationship with Parker was valuable, and creating conflict over one television special seemed potentially damaging to future business opportunities. But Binder's reaction was immediate and passionate. "You cannot cancel this show. Elvis needs this. American music needs this and television needs this. If you cancel now, you're not just destroying a television special, you're ending Elvis Presley's career. The debate that followed revealed the complex pressures that were threatening to destroy Elvis's comeback before it could begin. NBC executives were caught between their investment in the special and their fear of the cultural and political risks it represented. Parker was caught between his loyalty to Elvis and his terror of the financial consequences of defying organized crime. Elvis himself was caught between his desperate need for artistic validation and his complete ignorance of the forces that were trying to control his career. The resolution came from an unexpected source: Elvis's own instinct for survival and his deep understanding of what the special meant for his future. On the morning of June 25th, as NBC executives were finalizing the cancellation order, Elvis appeared unannounced at the Burbank studios where the special was supposed to be filmed. He had driven himself from his hotel, without bodyguards or handlers, carrying only an acoustic guitar. "I heard there might be some problems with the show," Elvis told Mike Dan when he found him in the studio. "I thought maybe I should talk to you directly." What followed was a conversation that changed television history and saved Elvis's career. For 30 minutes, Elvis spoke with a passion and intelligence about music that reminded everyone present why he had become the most important performer of his generation. "This special isn't just about me making a comeback," Elvis explained. "It's about showing people that rock and roll is serious music, that it deserves to be taken seriously, that it can be more than just entertainment for teenagers. If we don't do this show, if we let fear stop us from taking risks, then we're admitting that everything we've been trying to do with music doesn't really matter." But Elvis's most powerful argument wasn't verbal, it was musical. Without asking permission or waiting for a formal setup, Elvis began performing an acoustic version of Heartbreak Hotel that demonstrated everything the special could accomplish. The performance was intimate, powerful, and completely authentic. Elvis's voice, strengthened by months of preparation, carried emotional weight that his recent movie soundtracks had completely lacked. His guitar playing, simple but effective, created a musical foundation that needed no additional production or orchestration. Most importantly, the performance proved that Elvis could still command attention and create genuine emotional connection with his audience. The small group of NBC executives, crew members, and creative staff who witnessed the impromptu concert were completely captivated by what they saw and heard. "It was like seeing Elvis for the first time," Mike Dan later recalled. "All the movie star stuff fell away. All the Vegas glitter disappeared, and you could see why this guy had changed American culture. He was still that powerful, still that compelling, still that important." The impact of Elvis's impromptu performance was immediate and decisive. Within hours, NBC executives were calling their New York headquarters, arguing passionately that the special had to proceed as planned. The network's investment was too significant, Elvis's artistic potential was too obvious, and the cultural importance of the project was too great to abandon. But the most important change was in Colonel Parker's position. Faced with the reality of Elvis's commitment to the special and the network's renewed enthusiasm for the project, Parker realized that trying to cancel the show would create more problems than allowing it to proceed. Instead of cancellation, Parker negotiated a compromise that addressed some of the concerns that had created the crisis in the first place. The special would be filmed as planned, but with additional security and control measures that would limit the potential for controversy or unexpected developments. More significantly, Parker secretly negotiated the Las Vegas engagement that would follow the special, ensuring that Elvis's return to live performance would happen in the casinos where Parker's debts were held. The television special would serve as a promotional vehicle for the Vegas comeback, allowing Parker to satisfy his creditors while maintaining his control over Elvis's career. The filming of the Elvis comeback special took place on June 27th and 29th, 1968, and the results exceeded everyone's expectations. The intimate concert segments captured Elvis at his most authentic and powerful, while the production numbers demonstrated his continued ability to command a stage and connect with large audiences. But the most important outcome of the special wasn't visible during the filming. It was the restoration of Elvis's confidence in his own abilities and his renewed commitment to music as an art form rather than just a commercial enterprise. During those 2 nights of filming, Elvis later told close friends, "I remembered why I fell in love with music in the first place. Not for the money or the fame or the movies, but for the feeling of connecting with people through songs, of sharing something real and important." The special aired on December 3, 1968, and its impact was immediate and overwhelming. Television critics hailed it as a masterpiece of the medium. Rock critics acknowledged Elvis's return to artistic relevance, and the viewing audience responded with enthusiasm that translated into renewed record sales and concert demand. But perhaps the most significant consequence of the special was its demonstration that Elvis Presley, when given the opportunity to perform authentically and passionately, remained one of the most compelling figures in American popular culture. The success of the comeback special established the template for Elvis's Las Vegas period, which began in 1969 and continued until his death in 1977. While the Vegas years produced some of Elvis's greatest live performances, they also fulfilled Colonel Parker's obligations to the people who had nearly canceled the television special that made those performances possible. The crisis that almost destroyed Elvis's comeback revealed the complex web of business, artistic, and criminal interests that surrounded his career during his final decade. It also demonstrated Elvis's instinctive understanding of his own artistic value and his willingness to fight for the opportunities that would allow him to express that value. Years later, Steve Binder reflected on how close the world came to never seeing Elvis's greatest television performance. If Elvis hadn't shown up that morning with his guitar, if he hadn't been willing to fight for what he believed in, the 1968 special never would have happened. And without that special, there might not have been a Vegas period, a That's the Way It Is documentary, or any of the great live Elvis recordings from the 1970s. The comeback special that almost never happened became the foundation for everything Elvis accomplished during his final decade. It proved that his artistic powers were not only intact but potentially stronger than ever, and it established his lasting influence on rock and roll, popular music, and American culture. But the story of the special's near cancellation also revealed the dark forces that were shaping Elvis's career behind the scenes. Forces that would continue to influence his life and work until his death less than 9 years later. The king of rock and roll had fought for his artistic survival and won, but the victory came with costs and compromises that would define the remainder of his tragically short career. Sometimes the greatest triumphs are the ones that almost never happen, and sometimes the most important battles are the ones that are fought not on stage but in boardrooms and hotel rooms where the future of art is decided by people who may not understand what they're trying to destroy. Elvis Presley's 1968 comeback was both an artistic triumph and a reminder of how fragile genius can be when it's surrounded by forces that value profit over creativity, control over authentic expression, and short-term gain over lasting cultural impact. The special that almost got canceled became the special that saved the king, but it also became the special that revealed just how close America came to losing one of its greatest cultural treasures to the mundane corruptions of business and crime.